Very warm evening and a Merry Christmas to all the dignitaries, guests, and delegates present with us today. I, Prithviraj Sudarshan, a research coordinator and a young member of the Global Counterterrorism Council, along with my colleagues Nivedita Toletti and Tanisha Barik, will be a host for the evening. Firstly, before moving on to the proceedings of the evening, I would like to introduce GCTC to all of those who are not familiar with our organization. The Global Counterterrorism Council is an international think tank based in New Delhi, which is incepted and initiated by public-spirited experts to bring in momentum into the discourse on issues of national interest and global conscience about terrorism as a threat to humanity. We try to bring together communities and nations to deliberate on issues that essentially affect all our lives in some way or another.
Today, we have all gathered together to celebrate a man who is known to be one of the most influential and charismatic leaders ever to be born on the Indian soil. Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee was born on 25th December 1924 in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. He was first elected to Parliament in 1957 as a member of the Bharatiya Jana Sangh, which was then known as the forerunner of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Vajpayee was sworn in as the Prime Minister in May 1996, and he had been praised for his conciliatory gestures towards India's minority communities. Under his leadership, India achieved steady economic growth and the country became a world leader in information technology. On December 25, 2014, he was awarded the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian honor.
The 25th of December also observed as Good Governance Day by Indians all around the world in order to honor the late Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. Good Governance Day was founded in 2014 to raise awareness among citizens on government accountability. The main objectives for Good Governance Day include making voters aware of government's commitment, openness and integrity of its administration, implementing good and effective strategies to accomplish a good governance task in India, and enhancing the country's growth and prosperity with strong governance.
Mr. Vajpayee was truly a man of an eclectic personality. Much has and always will be said about Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the political man. As we celebrate the birth anniversary of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, we would also like to remember him as a prolific poet and lyricist. It would only be fitting to open this evening with words written by the great man himself. This is from a poem he called Bharat Zami Ka Tukra Nahi. भारत जमी का टुकड़ा नहीं, जीता जागता राष्ट्र पुरुष है, हिमालय मस्तक है, कश्मीर किरीट है, पंजाब और बंगाल विशाल कंधे हैं, पूर्वी और पश्चिमी घाट दो विशाल जंघाएं हैं, कन्याकुमारी इसके चरण है, सागर इसके पैर पखारता है, ये चंदन की भूमि है, अभिनंदन की भूमि है, ये तर्पण की भूमि है, ये अर्पण की भूमि है, इसका कंकर कंकर शंकर है, इसका बिंदु बिंदु गंगा जल है। हम जिएंगे तो इसके लिए, मरेंगे तो इसके लिए। I will leave you with these profound words as we begin the proceedings of this evening. I would like to ask Nivedita, my colleague, to please introduce the speakers of the day.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. Joining us today is Sri Shakti Sinha, former private secretary to Vajpayee. Mr. Sinha is the director of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Policy Research and International Studies, MS University, Vadodara. He is a distinguished member at India Foundation. Mr. Sinha was the former director of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library and was a part of the Indian Administration Service from the batch 1979. He has also served as a joint secretary in the Prime Minister's office in the past. Sinhaji, it is our pleasure to have the launch of your book, Vajpayee, The 3 Years That Changed India, along with us at GCTC. We are thankful to you for giving us this amazing opportunity. We extend our best wishes to you for authoring such a wonderful book. To all the audience members, the book will soon be available on Amazon. Please make sure to get yourself a copy.
No, it's already available on Amazon. It's already amazing, available on Amazon and doing fairly well. But if more of you buy it, it'll do even better.
Sure, sir. My apologies. Sinhaji, GCTC welcomes you.
Thank you.
It is also an honor to have with us Shri Desh Ratan Nigam as the moderator today. Shri Desh Ratan Nigam, sir, is an experienced Supreme Court advocate and is often credited to be a well-known RSS thinker and activist. Sir has also been a key member of various newsroom debates as a political analyst and historian. GCTC welcomes you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Shakti Sinha ji to address the virtual gathering present here with his wise words.
I'm not sure the wise words, Prithviraj, but thank you very much for the occasion. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you. The book is right here. I hope you can see it.
Sir, we are not able to see you. Can you please?
You can't see me? My camera is on. My camera, Aditya, is very much on.
Sir, I think it is concerning network issues there.
Sorry?
I think you're facing network issues.
I have serious network issues. My house is in some kind of shadow.
Yeah, now we are able to see you.
I'm not sure which is better, seeing me or not seeing me, but I'll leave it.
Now it's better. Now it's better.
Okay.
Better, sir.
Pleasure to speak to you. And I believe that Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam is also from my college, Hindu college. I hope I'm correct. Nigam Saab, sahi bola, galat bola?
Yes, absolutely. I remember meeting you in 1999 when you were Director Education, Delhi government.
So I'm glad that I could see a few more faces from my college. Let me talk a little bit about the book, why I wrote the book. And I'll come straight to the point why I wrote the book. One, of course, is an introduction speakers, also young people who are introducing. We keep talking about Mr. Vajpayee, the great unifier, Mr. Vajpayee who carried people with him, etc. And how everybody loved him. And my own memories of those days were that every step of the way he was opposed, vicious language was used, fascist, anti-minority, Hindutva agenda, saffron, you name it, the same language was being used. And it's in nobody's case, not even mine, that Mr. Modi and Mr. Vajpayee are the same. And yet, the kind of language used hasn't changed in 2 decades. So I wanted to tell people that there's a French expression, which I only translate in English. It says the more things change, the more they remain the same. That's one. Second also is that, so much was achieved in a short while. And there should be critics of it. I don't think it is a perfect government. I think it had a lot of shortcomings. I agree there. But it never was comfortable in sense of numbers. I'm happy to see Mr. Tripathi also join us. It was never comfortable in numbers. You felt every day was the last day. Within the party, there were disagreements. This is okay. Each of the allies wanted some unreasonable thing. Jayalalitha wanted the finance ministry for her party. Alternately, she wanted that the revenue department should be broken out from finance ministry given to her nominee. She also wanted the DMK ministry in Tamil Nadu to be dismissed. She also wanted cases to be filed against Karunanidhi. That's one. Naveen Patnaik wanted the Congress government in his state to be dismissed. Mamta, with her 8 MPs, wanted the left-hand government in Bengal to be dismissed and lots of projects to be given to Bengal. Even somebody like Nitish Kumar and George Fernandez were quite pressing that the Rabri Devi government be dismissed. So I'm not saying they are wrong. I'm merely saying the realities of Indian politics. In that circumstance, to be able to work, bring some tried cohesion, and this government lacked cohesion. It seemed to lack purpose many times. So in these circumstances, things happened. I thought that today's younger generation, and not just younger generation, people of my generation and above, older than me, who seem to have a rosy tinted view of the past. I thought it's better now that 2 decades have passed. 2 decades is a long time to take reflection, that we take a step back and understand what were those tensions. The government elections were held, midterm polls. The NDA, by now it's an NDA with BJP and other parties, gets 251, 20 short of a majority. In the Indian custom, constitutional practice, They should have immediately invited to form a government. My apologies. Invited to form a government. They were not. There were no other claimants. There were no other claimants. VP Singh at 140 was invited to form a government. Narasimha at 221 was invited to form a government. Mr. Vajpayee at 160 was invited to form a government in 92. There were no other takers for it. This time they were not invited. It was prolonged. Numbers built up. It hit 260 plus. It was just a few short, 3-4 short. At that moment, they were asked to produce letters, written letters of support from the alliance partners. Now, historically, alliance partners, if they're a pre-poll alliance, you're not expected to show letters because you fought the elections together. They were asked to do that. That again allowed people like Amma to bargain harder. So the great difficulty this government, and incidentally, till then, there's nobody else claiming we have the numbers, or we can explore. Despite that, government is formed, immediately there are crises. And then Mr. Vajpayee did what to somebody who knew him should have expected it. People did not expect, because they think that the BJP says one thing and does other. Unlike most parties, the BJP normally tries to do what it says. It doesn't always succeed in doing so, but it does. They had said, we shall test the nuclear option. When the national agenda of governance was written down, when the NDA was formed, the BJP dropped everything else contentious. It did not drop the nuclear option. So it was there written on the wall, and yet people prefer not to see it. So they tested. It caused happiness, great joy, but it also brought international problem, massive amount of sanctions. India was shown as the villain. Pakistan was the hero. Pakistan ultimately tested. They said, oh, they were forced to test because of India. Pakistan tested 18 days after us. Could Pakistan have set up a nuclear program in 18 days and made a device? Absolutely not. But still, the world refused to see it. It took, of course, then slowly diplomacy started. People were sent out, talk, explain. It's Pakistan. It don't always get hyphenated, India, Pakistan, etc. One set of issues. Mr. Vajpayee believed that now that we have tested, we are confident enough to face the world, decided to open up to Pakistan. A lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was a brilliant move for two reasons. One, you had to break the hyphenation in Pakistan. You had to break it. India could not be bogged down in the Pakistani box all the time. Two was also to tell the world, fine, we have tested, they have tested. We will talk to them to show that we are mature people, we are responsible people. And therefore, he did that. He also did something which no prime minister before us since has done. In a speech at the Asia Society in New York, end of September 1998, he referred to India and the US as natural allies, not partners, allies. This is a time when we face sanctions, where Clinton had actually asked China, you sort out South Asia. You be an impartial judge between India and Pakistan. See, people forget all this. We have rosy ideas. Clinton actually said China can be an impartial judge between India and Pakistan. I mean, anybody who knows any bit of anything will know that this is absolutely nonsense, but that's how it was done. We reached out. Government went into further trouble because of some incidents in Gujarat, tribal areas over conversions. We had a horrible killing of Christian missionaries, Graham Staines in Odisha. So government did tremendous things. In that tension, Mr. Vajpayee accepted Nawaz Sharif's informal invitation to Shekhar Gupta's interview to welcome Mr. Vajpayee to visit Pakistan. He said, yes, I will go. Bus service is starting, I'll go by the first bus. It was an absolute shock to everybody. Not pre-discussed, not discussed at all, but it was done. The moment we came back, and in the meantime, the Bihar government had been dismissed. The Congress party the next day said they will oppose the dismissal of the Bihar government, use of Article 356. Within one day, Lahore had disappeared from the Indian papers, and Bihar and NDA came in front. Then the government falls in a month, and then you have a Kargil war. So, in this, I'm amazed to think back how in this very, very short period of time, extremely short period of time, whether it's the nuclear option, open to Pakistan, open to the USA, changing the telecom policy, moving on patents to comply with WTO requirements, and generally trying to free the economy, not just from the point of view of foreign direct investment, which those days we thought we really needed, which we did, but also with a view of improving the situation for Indian businesses to operate in India. How do you make things easier for Indian businesses to operate in India? So all this, as I said, happened literally in 13 months. And in the caretakership, we had the Kargil War. So this is a government with a caretaker government, not a regular government, having to deal with the war situation. So, you know, as I said, it's not a perfect government, but the shortcomings, absolutely. Cohesion was absent. They were easy. But still, as I said, things could be done. So I thought that, and you know, somebody told me today, sir, aapka kitab to bada factual kitab hai. I said, that is the whole point of it. I could easily have written a book which was titillating, but that would not be fair to those critical times. I guess there are other people who write better titillating stuff than I do. I'm trying to listing the facts. You're free to agree, you're free to disagree, you're free to come to your own decision, because mostly I've left it unsaid. I'm not even taking a side. Of course, one cannot be completely impartial. We are human beings after all. But this is what I've tried to do. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my take on the book. As I said, it is available on Amazon. I've called it Vajpayee, the years that changed India. What changed? Very quickly before I wrap up. Why do I call it the years that changed India? One, we talked about a nuclear option since the late 60s. We did not exercise it for various reasons. So ability to exercise the option and take the pressure. Second was tremendous political courage in opening up to Pakistan and the US. Today, opening to the US is considered the normal thing. It was not the normal thing those days. And third, during the Kargil War, when Pakistan had occupied Pakistani army across the LOC Indian territory, to refuse to a ceasefire till the Pakistanis vacated. Unlike 65 or 71, we had to agree to a ceasefire, because finally even the Russians said, listen, we can't veto any more resolutions, please have a ceasefire. This time we said we will not have a ceasefire till Pakistan vacates and goes back across the LOC. So I think these three things really, to my mind, today that if you think of them, looks very small. At that moment when we were there, it seemed very, very momentous. And that's the sign of how momentous they were, that today we take it as normal, because things have changed. So our parameters have changed. The way we measure things have changed. And therefore, it is the years that changed India. And it covers only up to the Kargil War. It's not about the term after that. I've said it again and again. People keep it right about it. I said, this is 340 pages. I can't write 1,000 pages. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm open to question, answers.
Yes.
Chairman, over to you.
Shakti ji.
Batai.
This is Desh Ratan Nigam.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and your book is really a sensation on internet as well as in the physical world, both. So my virtual Chandan for your Abhinandan in Vajpayee ji's word. And see, there's something people talk in terms of Kashmir, that he was the one who used the word Jamhuriyat, Insaniyat and Kashmiriyat. And people sometimes confuse it that he did not believe in the abrogation of 370 or 35A. And that is the narrative the opposition tries to build in India. I think Mr. Vajpayee had a different take on this subject. Would you like to put some light on it?
Absolutely. It's not in the book, but, you know, to me, removal of 370 was at the very heart of the agenda that the BJP and he had. He made it clear in Parliament when he was told you have a hidden agenda. He said, no, this is our agenda, but hamare paas sankhya nahi hai. So he didn't say we gave it up. Please remember, Mr. Vajpayee began his political life, not public life, when he was seconded and the Janasangh was formed to work with Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. He accompanied Shyam Prasad Mukherjee to the borders of Jammu Kashmir. When Mr. Mukherjee crossed the borders without the permit, Indian citizens were required a permit to enter the state of Jammu Kashmir. And the fight of the Janasangh was very, very clear. one flag, one constitution, one head. You know, ek pradhan, ek nidhan, ek you know. So, and at the borders, Mukherjee told him, Vajpayee, go back, take the message, you know, that I have crossed into that as an Indian, I refuse to apply for a permit to go to any other part of India. So I think Kashmir, he wanted definitely 35A, of course, nobody had heard of. I mean, can you imagine? I call it fraud on the constitution that you smuggled in 35A as an executive order into the constitution.
Yes.
Until the controversy arose about 5-7 years ago, nobody was even aware of 35A. Can you imagine? So, but I guess the circumstance that period, as I said, he didn't have the numbers. There was not enough consensus on the subject. And at the height of the militancy, terrorism, actually, why call it militancy? It was pure and simple terrorism. The innocents were being killed. Not just security men, but innocent killed. I think there was no question that Mr. Vajpayee was not in favor of retaining 370, but for tactically, he could not move ahead. That is something that we have to accept.
Yes, I think, thank you for that insight. Shakti ji, first it was 13 days, then 13 months, and 13 proved to be lucky for him ultimately, and he was there for the full term. And he was in fact not the backstabbing kind with which you will agree, but he was backstabbed most of the times. And I remember during my childhood days, as he was soft from inside, but he was like a Ashokan pillar from inside. His capacity to take decisions, and strong decisions, although it would not appear that he was that kind of a person from the outside, but his decision-making capacity was phenomenal. And that is where I think he stood India out. India came out to be a very confident and independent nation after he completed his full 5 years in 2004.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of people misunderstood him in that sense. See, one thing was that he would take up his mind after understanding a situation very, very carefully. He would take a long time to do so in that sense, in normal cases. But when he did so, when he finally took a decision, he was very, very firm on it. And then you could not cross him. You could not cross him on that. You know, when you have agreed on a line of action. And I remember a very controversial decision on the patents bill, where to put it simply, the old Jansangh in him did not want to go ahead with the Patents Act, amendments required. But having lost a case in the WTO, in the appeals panel, appellate body, whatever it's called, India had no option but to do the amendment. So the cabinet discussed it twice for hours and hours. And finally, at the end, he just said, "Acha, theek hai, next subject." That was it, matter closed. Once he said, "Acha, theek hai," which means no further discussions. The subject, hands are tied. What are we talking about? You know? So, and I've seen it in other cases, on Pakistan's case, and Kargil on the line of LOC, etc. Whether you agree with him or not, as I said, it's a matter of opinion. We are free to have our opinions. But once he took a decision, he was not going to compromise unless the facts change. Facts change, obviously your decision changes. But the impression conveyed was of chalta hai. The fact is, you know, as our friends from the Foreign Service are here, Suresh Goyal is here, he would bear me out, that whenever we meet a foreign delegation, the Foreign Ministry prepares all the information, talking points, background, etc., etc. The document is called a brief. They come like a lawyer's brief. But the damn brief is 300 pages. And it would come to him, he would have read it meticulously. So the people came to brief him on the brief. He had only a few questions. He had a very few questions, but you had known that he had read it, and the things he was asking was something very specific, you know, not a general point. So then you knew that behind that veneer of relaxed and laid back was a very hard-working mind. And I saw that in recording of speeches, you know, address to the nation. Something's gone wrong, stop it, start again. Stop it, start again. So a 10-minute speech would take 2 hours, 2.5 hours to record, because you can't get it wrong. Prime Minister, when speaking to the country, cannot make a mistake, right? He would do it. He never once complained. I would got irritated and walked out. He never complained. So that is it. Aditya is telling us that Mr. Dubey has a question, right?
Yes, General Dubey has a question.
General Dubey has a question.
Yes, please go ahead, General Dubey.
General Dubey, kindly switch on your mic. General Dubey, please switch on your mic. Or maybe we can take the questions afterwards then.
Yeah, let me then proceed further with Aditya's permission. Pokhran was a game changer for India, Shakti ji, and you had the knowledge of the inside working of that system and what exactly happened at that point of time, because there were anxious moments. Could you give us that insider account of the time of Pokhran?
I mentioned the book. So Vajpayee had just shifted from his old house, 7 Safdarjung Road, to Racecourse Road, 3 Racecourse Road. Contrary to popular impression, the Prime Minister does not say at 7 Racecourse Road, or what is it called now? The name has changed now. Anyway, so it says it's in 3. 7 is the office complex. It's now become really beautiful. I went the other day, it's completely changed. Very good how it looks. Number 5 was used as a guest house bungalow, and there we set up the control room in the drawing cum dining, which is a big room. So not too many people. The army signals had set up their dedicated line for Pokhran because you were afraid of being tapped. Now, one advantage is the analog days, and Mr. Kishan Verma will bear me out, is that in the analog days when you tapped your phone, you could make out the phone is tapped because the voice volume would drop. These are the digital days. You can tap a phone without a guy being tapped even coming to know about it. So it's dangerous now. We still didn't want to take a risk. So we had a dedicated line running straight from there. And it was a tense day. It was a momentous day. And we were waiting for things to happen, but we were worried that things may go wrong. Things can always go wrong, right? You're testing something. You have tested the design on paper. You're not testing the design since 74. You needed to test. The wind direction, you have to be careful. There need to be no wind direction. You don't want dispersal. Even though it was an underground test, you're always worried about something escaping, So it was really a tense moment. But when the news came through that it is done, then the room became electric. The room was, I remember it so clearly, even though it is more than 22 years ago now. The moment was absolutely electric. But yet it was very dignified electric. It was not that the jumping and the chest beating. Best part was it was not chest beating. It was, you could sense that understanding. Okay, now that we're a nuclear weapon state, what does it mean? We cannot now be very casual in the way we deal with the world. So I think that was something, a lesson in humility. With responsibility, you get humility. You don't get to be haughty. And then, of course, we had to write on. Then Mahanji, late Mahanji was the man of style. Let's do this. We'll call the press, the lawns, single rostrum, and only the Prime Minister will go. Nobody else will go with him, and we'll stand away. So we wrote out just hardly a 3-line thing, actually typed by me on a laptop, like the one I'm using. Very simple lines. Today at such and such a time, India tested at the Pokhran range, and in line, all the results, very technical language, so that the word testing was there, thermonuclear device and a sub-kiloton. I don't remember the exact wording now. We wrote that and said it. What I liked was when we went to the lawns of 7 Racecourse Road by now, and we walked out, and Pramodji and I stood on the side, and Atalji went to the podium to speak. Hardly 2 minutes, English and Hindi together. A lot of photographers were in diagonal. So when the photos came the next day, our intention was only Atalji should be in the photograph. Most photographs had Atalji, Pramod Mahajan, and myself in the photo. Even though we wanted to concentrate, sometimes the best of planning goes here. But the point I had to make was, I was very touched, of course, that this had happened. Something that some of us had been hoping for since a child. Since the NPT came into operation in 67 or whenever. China's explosion of 64 at Lopnol, we realized that India would have to test if India wanted safety, security, peace. So India would have to test. And also the feeling that will you be taken seriously as a superpower when you become one? And this is a very poor country there if you don't have a nuclear weapon. So it's partly security, but it's also prestige. I mean, why does Britain require a nuclear weapon today? Why does France require it? You have the American umbrella, right? You still need it to show great power status. So in diplomacy, symbolisms and photo ops also count. You should not discount it. It's not a substitute for substance, is also required. So I think that moment was, to me, a big learning moment, very learning moment.
Shakti ji, you know that Shri Vajpayee ji was an RSS person.
Absolutely.
And so is Mr. Modi. What kind of similarity or differences do you need? Because I see a lot of continuation of Mr. Vajpayee by Mr. Modi, whether it is in terms of development, infrastructure, or farmers' issues, which are probably very relevant today, where the initiatives were taken by Mr. Vajpayee. So I find a lot of similarities between Vajpayee, although they both had a very different style, and people try to create that kind of artificial, hiatus between the two, that they are very different.
Right.
Except the style, I think content seems to be the same.
If you get a chance, all of you, Desh Ratan ji, yesterday's Hindustan Times, I have a piece on this edit page. So in today's Hindi Hindustan also, on what drove Mr. Vajpayee. If you read it, you'll see, without saying so, the tremendous amount of overlap between Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Modi. Tremendous overlaps. Were they exactly the same? Absolutely. Two human beings, born 26 years apart. One grew up in a colonial India. One grew up in a free India. One worked as a Karyakarta in the field for a very long time. One was in Delhi almost from the beginning, and the few years in Lucknow in the beginning, in the periphery of power, in parliament since 57, seeing a very, very small margin. Please remember, when the Jan Sangh was formed, it was a desperate measure, because otherwise the RSS and the Hindu Mahasabha, the breakaway faction, not the Savarkar faction, felt that we don't have a voice, that the Congress will crush us if we don't have our own platform. And when Mr. Vajpayee says he became MP in 57, there were 4 of them, all first-timers, backbench, wouldn't get a chance even to speak. So the kind of challenges they faced were very, very different. The words were different. I mean, those of us who remember the 60s, there used to be a body called the Aid India Consortium. So every year, United States, Britain, the World Bank, France, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, Holland. Can you imagine, sit down, this year we'll give so much money to India. We grew up as a desperately poor country. Mr. Vajpayee had seen that. Mr. Modi, on the other hand, comes into politics at a later time. India is already now. So obviously they will be different. Their worldviews are different, their experiences are different. India is different and the world has changed. Of course, they will have differences in their understanding. Plus, Mr. Modi has worked as the chief minister for a long time, far more comfortable with the way government functions. Mr. Vajpayee was a parliamentarian, a minister for a short while, 2 years and 4 months in Morarji Desai's government, and then prime minister, right? So it's a different worldview. But in terms of their understanding of India, in terms of their very clear understanding that loyalty to the motherland is greater than any other loyalty, including God, in that sense, that your person believes. Upasana Padhati is personal to you. Loyalty to the country is common to all of us. Right? So that clear view, Mr. Vajpayee was extremely uncomfortable with convergence, People forget that. He had said it, he had asked for a national dialogue on the subject even, and then he was accused of being anti-minority. He said, no, we must learn to live with each other, therefore we must have common rules of the game. And understanding of secularism, he said it in parliament again and again. He's saying secularism in the West is anti-religion. India secularism cannot be against our belief system because we have people with deep beliefs. You have to treat all of us equally. In the West, you ignore the church because democracy came up against the church. Here, there was no such reason. And therefore, he says the government should not be getting involved in this, but respecting. And that's why they dislike the word dharma nirpekshta. They say sarv dharma samha. So if you see tremendous amount of overlap in the way both of them are looking at it, the fact that Mr. Vajpayee's National Highway Scheme, Gram Sadak Yojana, and Telecom Revolution was all directed at, and people were laughing those days. Today, who uses cell phones? Who really needs it? The plumbers, the vegetable vendors, the electricians, the farmers who want to know which kaspa to go to, which mandi to go to, get a better price. Roads. If you don't have roads, the farmer cannot sell his produce or produce except in his own village and get a bad price. So, to think of how to do that. So economics is not about the grand announcements, but about Ujjwala as what has happened now. Ujjwala is a revolution in India. We don't talk about it. Swachhata is a revolution for women who can go to the toilet round the clock and not when the sun sets. You have to see it from that point of view. Revolution from there, not top down as we like to say. So I do see Desh Ratan Nigam. I am completely in agreement with you. Yes, there are differences between them, absolutely. But the amount of overlap, similarities is considerable, and we like to ignore it, which is possibly one of the reasons that I said, which I wrote the book, that you were using the same language against Mr. Vajpayee. You loved him so much now. Why did you love him then when he was in power?
Shakti ji, it is said that a leader must be both respected and feared in the appropriate situations.
Right.
How do you judge Mr. Vajpayee from this in this context?
I will refer you to this book written by the former journalist and very serious scholar Vinay Sitapati. Vinay's first book was on Narasimha Rao Hafla. His second book is on Jugalbandi, the Vajpayee-Advani relationship. And he quotes Subramanian Swamy and others to say that Mr. Vajpayee could, at certain moments, had to be feared, was feared by others, Now, it's a very, this is hyperbole, it's not a situation which is easy to explain. But I guess also that the second, as I said, when you're a leader of a party with 30, in 1967, the Janasangh got its highest number of MPs, which was 33 or 34, The Swatantra Party got 42 or 43. You are still small parties, So at that moment, I think wanting to be loved to get more votes was very important. But I think within the party, within the organization, to be serious, as I said, when he took a decision, then he stuck by the decision, and then you should not then changing your minds, and which he made it very clear, something that the late Mr. Balan Madhuk always complained about.
That's and another factor which is very, very important. We saw he called Pakistan Army as a rogue army.
Yeah.
And that phrase caught on, and still it is considered to be a rogue army. And in fact, it has become such a popular usage in an international media and otherwise. And at the same time, he gave a befitting reply to Pakistan. But you saw is the human aspect that when he cremated the 143 bodies of the Pakistanis, soldiers who were not even claimed as Pakistanis by the Pakistani establishment.
Absolutely.
That is where his emotional side comes to the fore, which we also see him in as a poet and an orator when he can speak extempore for very, very long time. And his I'm making a very comprehensive question with two parts. And then on the lighter side, if you see his food habits, his retreats to Manali and trouts that has been there. How do you reconcile such two extreme sets of personalities in the same person?
One, of course, is that, and I'm glad you raised this point, a very complex person. And frankly, to be born from a school teacher's family, and he was born actually in his village, Bateshwar, not in Gwalior, but everywhere written as Gwalior, so I don't blame people for saying so. No background, no political background, no godfather, to come up you have to be a person who's adjustable, who can in different circumstances. So, and I'm glad you raised the point about Kargil. The fact that what shocked all of us, I think, shocked him, shocked everybody around, that the Pakistani army, an army is known to look after its people. This army disowned its dead, let them, the dead bodies lie at 14,000 feet. Consciously decision taken, the Indian army flew in Maulvis to that height in helicopters. Remarkable job that the army did. Went to the proper rites, proper military burial was given to the Pakistani soldiers. I think that is where, I think, frankly, the Indian army is different from the Pakistani army. So the Pakistani army has a mind of its own. The Pakistani army has a country. India as a country has an army. That is the difference. So I think doing the respecting the dead, and there's an old war tradition that you respect the dead. You don't desecrate the dead. The Pakistanis desecrated the dead in the Kargil war. So, they were a rogue army. And as we found out from the transcripts of the conversations, which I'm sure our two former chiefs sitting around the table are aware of, that the Pakistani army was acting largely independently. And therefore the moniker rogue army caught on. Some people collected the money, took out full-page ads in American and British papers calling it the rogue army. And that was a part of the psychological game required to tell the world that you are not dealing with two equal countries. You're dealing with one, a responsible nuclear power, and an irresponsible, adventuresome rogue army. That distinction was required to be made. But I don't see the contradiction between a man who can do that and also enjoy good food. In fact, I've written in the book that supposing there are 6 visitors between 9:30 and 1 o'clock, and the samosas and the rasgullas come, Mr. Vajpayee would eat with each of them. So we have to tell the waiter that don't give him the plate. If you give him the plate, he will eat the rasgulla and the samosa, So we're fond of good food, no doubt about it. Trout and the prawns and the mangodi also. Very fond of Indian food, mangodi and all kinds of desi stuff. So, but yes, I think all of us have a combination of, we are not all sadhus. For a sadhu or a monk, it's all right. But I think as lay people, we are entitled to also enjoy good things of life.
Yes, certainly. One last conversation from my side. He said you can change friends but not neighbors. And he gave a befitting reply during Kargil. And Prime Minister Modi did agree that you can't change friends, but you can change friends, but you cannot change your neighbors.
Correct.
लेकिन if you cannot change your neighbors, लेकिन उनको पाठ तो पढ़ाया जा सकता है. So पाठ पहला lesson तो वहां पढ़ाया गया by Vajpayee ji, but Prime Minister Modi took it to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, of course, two things. I'm not belating what Modi did. 1999, we were not militarily powerful enough to do too much more than what we did. India was a different country, a much poorer country. We're a far better country now, far stronger country now, on one hand. On the other hand, international pressures have changed. But the fact is that the UPA could have done the same. What Mr. Modi did, the UPA could have done it, after Bombay as an example. So they did not do it. And I think the doctrine that now has been adopted, called offensive defense. See, our security strategy is very clear. Our army is not there for expeditionary purposes. These are not expeditionary forces. They are here to defend the motherland. We shall do that. However, if you are fighting an unconventional war with me, war through any measures, I am entitled to take such actions, offensive actions, that will prevent you from attacking me. So I'm not attacking you to hurt you by itself. I'm attacking those capabilities of yours that are directed towards me in an unorthodox manner. So, this distinction, this nuancing is very much required. And I'm glad that that has been done now. And not that the rogue army will go away very easily, but the rogue army had to be told that if you are unorthodox, we can also be unorthodox, So I think that message to them was very much required. Will they learn it? Well, they didn't learn it after 71. So it's not going to be very easy for us. We require patience, determination, and not get worried if sometimes we are failures. We should accept that in this complex situation, failures will happen. We have to accept that you can lose battles, you cannot lose the war. To win the war, you have to really think hard, long.
Thank you, Shakti ji. Aditya, the question answer sessions can begin now.
Right. Ambassador Goyal has a question, please.
Ambassador Goyal is on the phone. सुरेश जी आप फोन पर हैं, आपका सवाल पूछ रहे हैं.
Sorry, Shakti.
मुझे पता था.
May I now just ask something, Shakti?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Go ahead.
Am
Sir.
I audible?
Very
Yes,
loud and clear.
Hello.
बताइए, I can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello.
Which means he is not audible.
I think I will have to come back.
Yes, sir. We are able to hear you.
He can't hear you.
Okay, sir. Maybe we can take Krishan Verma's question and also General.
पार्टी जी भी पूछना चाह रहे हैं, मुझे देखने से लग रहा है पार्टी जी भी सवाल पूछेंगे बोर्ड में, पर पहले किशन वर्मा जी पूछेंगे.
First, let me congratulate you, Shakti. I think it's a brilliant book.
Thank you,
and
sir.
a great insight into the happenings, the inner workings, the tensions that actually one undergoes in those very sensitive offices. You did describe the 98 explosion and with two words. You talked about tension and you talked about momentous. I would add another verb to that, and I would an adjective to that, and I would say it was a glorious time. It was one of the most defining moments of history in this country. Brought us, put us into a different trajectory as far as the nuclear world was concerned, and the acceptability into the larger community of nations where India actually has a place, and we actually claimed it through this process. So let me congratulate you on that.
Thank you very much.
The point, Shakti, this quick question that I wanted to ask you was during this time and after this, and I think Mr. Nigam actually mentioned that the kind of contrast, if you see at all, between the leadership of that time and this, you have answered it partially by saying, the pressures, the political pressures were different, circumstances were different, a coalition government as opposed to a majority. Do you think he would have done something different if he had this absolute majority, or would the roadmap have been more or less the same as we are following today?
Okay, a very good question. I think it's something which I've grappled with for a long time. I've really grappled with it for a long time. I think that the goals were the same. Maybe the method would have been different because of their background, their generational gap, their experience. But I think the methods, as I said, were different, but the goal was the same. Article 370 had to go.
Right.
Twice in the parliament he mentioned, Poland was ruled by Russia for 70 years from the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. In the heart of Warsaw, the Russians had built an Orthodox church by demolishing an earlier Catholic church. When Poland became free again after the First World War, the first thing that the Polish government decided was to demolish the Orthodox church and build a grand Catholic cathedral, which is right there in the heart of Warsaw even today. Mr. Vajpayee mentioned this again and again, which means the point he was making was, yes, the temple must come up. What he wanted to do then, and he was very appreciative of the late Chandrasekhar's prime ministership. He says Chandrasekhar had been allowed to continue by Rajiv Gandhi. Chandrasekhar would have brought about a compromise by which the local Muslims would have vacated that area, built a mosque somewhere else, and the temple would come up here. And he says actually that this bunkum business of two Haryana policemen spying was nonsense. The idea was to sabotage Chandrasekhar's ability to get this agreement done. So he wanted the thing done. A man of that generation obviously wanted to do it differently. But again, as he told Parliament on 17th of December 1992, he said if Mr. Advani and the BJP leadership and the RSS leadership wanted the mob disputed structure to be broken in the way it was, would they have gone and stood there? They would not have gone and stood there. So things went out of control, they agree. But the idea was that Uniform Civil Code, India requires it. Article 370 must go. And for the sake of our wounded civilization, the temple must be built. That's what I'm saying. So fundamentally, and my friends who are differently inclined disagree with me on that. I think no. Mr. Vajpayee may have acted in a different manner, but the goals were the same. The goals were the same. As he said once, mat bhed hai, man bhed nahi hai. So man wahi hai, tarika mein farak hai.
Thank you. I have another question, but I'll come back to you later on that, Shakti. If somebody else has a question, I'll come back to you later.
Thank you, Krishna Verma sir. Maybe we can have Ambassador Goyal.
Thank you very much, Aditya, and thank you, Shakti. What a delightful conversation we have had this evening. And I mentioned to Aditya that my two favorite prime ministers, one of them was, of course, Atal Bihari ji, and I had had several opportunities, not as close as you did, Shakti, of course, but when I was in New York and later on when I came back to Delhi and I was working in the ministry, there were certain moments when I had an opportunity to understand how his mind works and what he thinks. One thing which I really admired, two or three things, in fact. One is his large-heartedness. There were many occasions when I had to say no to him. And I was concerned because I'd been told that he does not like a no for an answer. But I had to say no to him. I explained to him and he kept quiet. I don't know whether he liked it or not, but he kept quiet. That was one. Second thing, I think there are very few now who, in the case of foreign policy or working in the area of the foreign policy, give a cohesive view of the government. On many occasions in United Nations, in bilateral interactions, I know that there were occasions when he had a different view from the government, but in his conversations with the other leaders, he would maintain that as a representative of the government of India, he is honor bound to adhere to what the government view is. And he was very clear that he can argue that view with his own people. But when he's interacting with the other governments, he must be cohesive. And thirdly, he was very inclusive. I'm sorry, but I'm saying all these things because the question really comes from these parameters. I have never seen any political leader from any party who tried to be as inclusive as he was in all fora. Now, my question really is, I happen to be in New York, and I was rather reluctant to ask about Babri Mosque, but since the question has already been put and you have already answered part of it, I was in New York on that day when Babri Mosque or Ayodhya, Ram Janmabhoomi at that time, whatever you want to call it. At that time, the Karsevaks had gone and they had broken the Gumbad. And I saw the reaction on the face of Atal Bihari ji at that time in the meeting. And he was extremely unhappy, kept on repeating, "Ye acha nahi hua." Now, my question to you is, and it will be again out of the book, would he have dealt with the Ram Janmabhoomi issue the same way that it is being done now, or he would have used a different approach? Number one. Number two, please don't answer it if you think I'm being stupid, but I do want to know, since I have a close relationship with the BJP through my family, do you think the BJP would have been a different party if Atal Bihari ji had been active? Thank you very much.
Lovely. Both very good questions. Your other Prime Minister favorite is Jawaharlal Nehru, I presume.
No. Narasimha Rao. PV Narasimha Rao.
I was just pulling your leg. He was very fond of food from your part of Delhi. The old Delhi Khana, he was very appreciative of your वो क्या होता है पीली दाल का जो रोटी बनाते हैं and all that, extremely fond of it. Chila, so etc. Very fond of all that food. So but Vijay Goyal would regularly bring it and we would have it, the Ram Janmabhoomi case, it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court passed an order saying, yes, you can build a temple here, form a committee to do that. So I think if that had come in his time, he would have done the same thing. I mean, the government did not decide. You followed, there was the High Court, Allahabad High Court order, which was somewhat impractical order. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court judgment, which runs to 1,200 pages, I think, has taken a lot of historical records and come to a certain decision. Right, wrong. You can argue till the end of the day, it won't matter. Once a judgment comes to say, yes, build a temple, build a temple. Would he have attended the puja or not himself? I really don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. You have a point there. But I think the puja is a small part of the desire which is articulated in Parliament by Mr. Vajpayee more than once. I can give you the references, two references that I know. I can give it to you. 17th of December, 1992, and it will be the end of May, 1998, 25th, 26th, 27th of May, 1996. He made it very clear that following this Polish example, we have to do it. But as I said, you need a process to do it. His preferred method was negotiations, which I think was everybody's preferred method. As I said, if they wanted to demolish it, they would have demolished it quietly. Why would they have their entire leadership standing right there to get it demolished? And incidentally, the BJP, which had lost power in 92 in UP, got absolute majority once again in 2017. So the BJP remained out of power effectively, other than a short period, Rajnath Singh coalition government, Kalyan Singh coalition government. On absolute majority, it took the BJP 25 years to come to power in UP. So they paid a price for it. They really paid a price for it. So in that sense, as I said, circumstances are different. Would the BJP have been a different party? That can be said absolutely. It would have been a different party. Maybe they would not have got 282 and 703 MPs also, So history is a terrible thing that ex post, it becomes very difficult. Had we exercised the other option, had we tested when Bhabha was almost ready to test, but Nehru fell ill in 63, the world would have been different. Absolutely, The people forget it was Nehru who started India's nuclear program. What was Bhabha doing? Why was Sarabhai involved in rocketry? Why did India require rockets for? Missile delivery systems. So, and post 62 war, there was a realization that India needed the nuclear option. Unfortunately, at Bhubaneswar, Nehru had that stroke and never got out of it. Shastri obviously was not in a position in the party to have gone through with the test, and we lost the opportunity. Had we tested then, things would have been different. So in that sense, you can always argue for the counterfactual. Yes, the BJP would have been different, definitely. How different? I don't know. As I said, would they have got a majority? I have my doubts. I really would have doubts.
Thank you, sir. Well, our research coordinator, Tanusha, has a question. Tanusha, please, over to you.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, Tanusha.
Sir, my question to you was that if Mr. Vajpayee had been alive to see the abolition of Article 370 take place, do you think he would have agreed with the manner in which it was done or with the prolonged curtailment of internet services in the region?
One, of course, is that it's very hypothetical. It's very, very hypothetical.
Definitely, sir.
It's extremely hypothetical. But I also tell people, I told somebody yesterday only, was it? Yeah, Quint, I told yesterday. It's on the interview that Quint is carrying with me. Please understand, Mr. Vajpayee also ordered the full mobilization of the Indian Army, full mobilization of the Indian Army, post the attack on the parliament. Not been done since, not been done before. In a non-war situation, to mobilize your army is not easy, extremely expensive, money and loss of lives. The Indian Army lost a lot of people in removing the mines because mines shift. They put a mine, it shifts, So it was a difficult decision. He took it. So it's not, don't think of Mr. Vajpayee as a goody-goody person. Of course he was goody-goody. He was not, he was different. But yet at the end of the day, a leader at the top sometimes has to take decisions for which there are no options. Mr. Vajpayee was attacked. Tanusha, you were not born probably, or you were born, you must have been very, very small if you were born at all. Please read the last chapter of my book. Also read somewhere in between the language used by the very same people who today write that Mr. Modi's divisive Vajpayee was so inclusive. Yes, I agree with Suresh Goyal, Vajpayee was inclusive. Suresh Goyal said that also in 1998. These people then accused Vajpayee of being divisive then. Today they find him inclusive. I don't know whom to believe. My memory, when I read the newspaper, what the language they used or what they say now, you know. So it's a selective thing, but it's a hypothetical. But we have Nehru pushed the First Amendment, which expanded the meaning of public order to cover everything. So you could curtail fundamental rights on grounds of threat to the security of the state, not security of the country, you know. Now, and then Murtaza Fazil Ali says that between public order, between treason, between security of the state, there's not much of a difference, you know. They're not colonial, they're post-independent, First Amendment, you know. So who can do what in what circumstances? I don't know, really. I cannot be in their minds and later, you know.
Sir, our advisory board member, Shri Sanjeev Tripathi, who was a former Raw chief also, he has a
हाँ भाई मैं तो संजीव त्रिपाठी जी को देख रहा हूँ, but त्रिपाठी जी इंटरनेट कनेक्शन अपनी वाइफ के नाम पे रखे हुए हैं।
बस यार हमसे चेंज नहीं हो रहा, I don't know how to
मैं देख रहा हूँ नीता त्रिपाठी लिखा हुआ पीछे तो
Shakti, first of all, I'd like to compliment and congratulate you for
Thank you,
writing
sir.
the
Thank
book.
you.
I have not read the book, but whatever I heard today, is you speaking about the book, really contains something extremely important which people of this country must know, and I compliment you for writing all those important issues on all those important issues. You know, I never had opportunity to interact with him, but prior to his taking over as prime minister, when he was leader opposition, I recall that he agreed to lead Indian delegation to the United Nations Human Rights Commission when the resolution was
1994 Geneva.
and that time I was in Geneva handling
Okay.
and at that point of time I interacted quite closely with him because he was there for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, it clearly showed that for him national interest was everything.
Absolutely.
And political interest or his personal interest had absolutely no meaning for him if there was any question of national interest. You have not written about that period of apparently.
I mentioned it in passing.
So, but this would have subsequently discussed when he was prime minister and you were close to him. That did he hesitate a little bit when he was asked to lead the Indian delegation? And to go to Geneva and present India's case, and he did it extremely effective. You know, that resolution failed badly. The effective way which the Indian delegation led by him presented India's case on Kashmir, and Pakistan had at that point of time tried all means to corner India on that, but he very, very effectively did that. So, was there any, when this offer was made to him, was there any hesitation on his part to take it on?
To answer that question, of course, I've discussed it with him, but to answer that question, when he was leader of the opposition, he was also the chairman of the Standing Committee on External Affairs, Parliament. So all foreign delegations used to come and meet him in Parliament House, or he met them in Hyderabad House or Rashtrapati Bhavan, etc. Detailed briefing from MEA, very detailed briefing from MEA, he would take on that, and he would say the government's points there, and he also told some of them. He said, listen, I fight the government every day in Parliament. Every day I fight the government in Parliament. When it comes to foreign affairs, we have only one view, the Indian view. We do not have. He says, once a government has taken a decision, if the decision is changed, I will defend it, on foreign affairs, And therefore, on Geneva, there was no question of a hesitation. It was a question of the country. I mean, Kashmir is at the core of the Indian identity in that sense that to demolish the myth of partition, Kashmir is very important. He was absolutely no question in his mind that he would have said no to that. Very smart move by Narasimha Rao. And interestingly, a serving minister, Ghulam Nabi Azad, went as deputy leader to show to the world that in the Indian democracy, it does not matter whether in the ruling party or the opposition. On this issue, we are together. The Pakistanis made fun of Ghulam Nabi Azad. Are naam hai Azad ho magar Ghulam. Which just shows how little Islam they know. Because Ghulam Nabi is one. In Arabic, kiske gulam ho? Nabi ke gulam hai, yaar. How idiotic of the Pakistanis not to know Islam themselves by pilloring him. But Vajpayee's leadership was effective, and he was deeply grateful, I think, for the opportunity to do so. So the question of reluctance, no. He was grateful, in fact, that he could serve the country. Tripathi Sahab, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm saying what a contrast now. Can you expect similar thing from any leader of the opposition now?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Kishan Verma ji is dying to ask again. I know that, sir. Please go ahead.
Can I ask this question? I know everybody's sharing a little personal anecdote. I wanted to share one myself. Shakti, you might be able to recall this because you were very close and you were accompanying Vajpayee ji on his foreign visits. My wife and Namita ji were very close to each other, and my first daughter was being born, and she asked, "What do you want Babaji to get?" And she said, "Get a little toy." And my first toy for my first daughter was brought by him from London. It was a Fisher toy, which is still with us even today. That's a personal anecdote, and of course, I went out to thank him for this. It was just a great gesture that he made.
Yeah.
On the book and the I just wanted to ask a question. Shakti has been belaboring me for a long time, even when I was in service. He was the first person who went to China after the '62 war as a foreign minister. 1979, a path-breaking visit.
Yeah.
We were in the cold for a very long time.
Yes.
And if you recall, that was the day while he was there visiting as a foreign minister and breaking ice and meeting Deng Xiaoping, that the Chinese launched their attack on Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that went down as many people interpreted it differently. Was it a lesson to India? Were they actually giving an indication to us? Did we read it right? That you guys need to understand that we're a powerful country in this region.
Right.
And we put you down. And I wanted to contrast that with what is happening today, where again the same thing, the Prime Minister has been engaged in talks at a very high level. They've met the topmost leaders. The confidence building measure has been gone through. There's been a reset of relations. There was much more that was expected in the outcome of India-China relations. Is this something that we misjudged then and we misjudged now? Or do you think this was something that the Chinese were able to sort of do a Sun Tzu on us?
Good point. In fact, Mr. Vajpayee told me something which is very different from what you're saying. And he, of course, said that therefore he walked out and the delegation curtailed his visit and flew back to India when it happened. Much later, on retrospect, and after these KGB records were, you remember that KGB defectors had gone to America and carried a lot of the records.
That's right.
The University of Florida has all those records.
Yes.
Mr. Vajpayee seemed to believe that the Russians had egged the Vietnamese to irritate the Chinese. And that Russia actually did not want India and China to make up then. See, China of 78 is not the China of today. It was, you could have given them a knockout in 68. After the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese army was in no position to fight a war, their own officers had been disgraced, the generals had been knocked off and all kinds of things. He seemed to think that it was more complicated. It was not China sending a message, but China provoked by Vietnam and the Russians. This thing, that's a very different from what I had understood it in that moment. I'm still not sure that he's right on that. But yes, you're right in the sense that, and where's my other book? I must do some self-publicity. You're supposed to have my other book, which is an edited volume.
The One Mountain, Two Tigers, which I've read.
Yes.
And I promised to review that. I have to do that very quickly.
Yes. So, Aditya, please promote this book.
No, it's a wonderful book.
The Chinese are clear now And they aligned with Deng Xiaoping. People misunderstood. Deng Xiaoping said, bide low, basically bide your time. Lie low,
Right.
bide your time, don't take leadership. Bide your
Right.
time. In other words, at some moment you have to stand up and assert yourself, right? So China is now determined, and that period has started, I think, around 2005-6 onwards, and promoted up 2008 on become worse. To tell the world, I don't care. I want to be. Desh Ratan ji ka kya point tha? I want to be feared more than I want to be loved.
Right.
That is China's stance. Now, they were not very clear those days also. They were playing games, obviously. Our Naga rebels, our Mizo rebels, everybody, they were hosted them in Sichuan and via Bangkok and other places. So they were not very clean with us then. They're definitely not at all clean with us now, you know.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that is something which people blame the government for it. Well, even when you were not there, this government was not there. China was working with Pakistan to undermine India everywhere. The missile technology exchange via North Vietnam, the nuclear technology given to North Vietnam via Pakistan. So we look at all that. We have to be more realistic about China. We can't wish it away. We have to handle them differently because China would not like India to rise beyond a point, you know.
Right, right. And I think what they did in 2003 when we went in again and we recognized the Tibetan Autonomous Region as a part of China, which is perhaps, again, a landmark kind of a thing. So I think they were deceptive and they've actually now shown it, the true colors. And
I was in America then. I personally felt that the 2003 statement was uncalled for. Because, you know, the 2003 statement unfortunately confuses Tibet with TAR.
Absolutely.
Tibet is much bigger than TAR. Tibet is
Absolutely.
much bigger than TAR.
Absolutely.
We reduced Tibet to TAR in the 2003. You know, so in that sense, I think we were misled. We were misled, we were naive or whatever it is. As I said, I don't say that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Thank you, Shakti.
Well, so we have one more research coordinator, Monia. She has a question.
Happily, and I want some others also to ask. Some non-research coordinators also to ask.
Yeah, Monia, please.
Monia, please go ahead. Monia has left the meeting. He didn't want to ask the question.
No. I guess just left the meeting. Okay. Then we have General Dubey, please. General Dubey. General Dubey, please switch on your mic, please.
Late evening on Christmas time to do something more. But I have actually one more interview. I have an interview beginning at 8 o'clock.
Right, sir. Anyway, sir, I guess it was a great privilege to have you, sir, in this very important evening. I would now request Tanu to kindly go with the vote of thanks.
On behalf of the Global Counterterrorism Council, I would like to extend our warm gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Mrs. Shakti Sinha, and our wonderful moderator, Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam. It is quite impossible to imagine a better way to commemorate this wonderful day, a confluence of many occasions, without your words and your insights. Thank you, sir. And please accept our warm wishes once again for the inevitable and already evident success of your new book. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend our warmest gratitude to the distinguished members of audience who have joined us here today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the Executive Council and Advisory Board of GCTC. A special thanks to Mr. Aditya Tikusa, our founder and convener, for his constant guidance and support.
And before you end, please encourage your viewers to buy the book also.
Definitely, sir, definitely. Last but not the least, my profound gratitude to the research coordinators of GCTC and an open invite to everyone present here to please go check out Sir's book and avail a copy for yourself. It will offer you nothing but deep insights. And I wish you all a wonderful good governance day, a very happy Christmas, and a very good evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful interacting with all of you. I wish General Dubey and Monia could have spoken, but some other time. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakti Sinha ji. Thank you.
Thank you.